When we think of House the TV show, the first thing that usually comes to mind is Dr. Gregory House himself, brilliant, abrasive, and always ready to take on a medical mystery like it's a game of chess. But let's flip the script for a second. What if, beneath the surface of all that witty banter and complex diagnoses, there's a much darker story lurking? What if, instead of just a medical drama, House is actually a horror show, where the true terror isn't in the diseases but in the very nature of healthcare itself? From the very first episode, the hospital setting isn't just a backdrop. It's a character in its own right. The sterile hallways, the harsh fluorescent lighting, and the endless maze of rooms filled with sick people create an atmosphere that's both claustrophobic and eerie. Sure, there are moments of triumph when a patient is cured, but the show also revels in the gruesome details of illnesses, making it feel like we're watching an anatomy horror film. Each episode feels like a slow crawl through a nightmare where the stakes are life and death. The show capitalizes on the unsettling ambience of a hospital. Consider the soundscape: machines beeping, the distant echoes of footsteps, and the hushed tones of worried families, all serve to heighten the sense of unease. The horror lies not just in the diseases themselves, but in the very environment that houses them. It's a place where vulnerability is magnified, where each patient lies exposed not only to their ailments but to the cold, unfeeling system that governs their care. Imagine being in a hospital bed, feeling utterly vulnerable, only to be hit with the reality of how much this experience is going to cost you. In one episode, a patient might come in with a bizarre case of a rare disease, and while House and his team are figuring out the medical puzzle, the patient is silently thinking about the staggering bills accumulating as they lie there. This isn't just a fleeting thought. It's a life-altering nightmare that can lead to bankruptcy, stress, and a lifetime of debt. In a world where the price of healthcare is constantly rising, the horror of House takes on a very real form. Patients are diagnosed with something horrifying, only to find out they have to pay an arm and a leg, if not their whole leg, to treat it. The emotional agony of watching their bodies deteriorate is matched only by the mental anguish of wondering how they'll pay for their care. Take, for example, the patient who comes in with symptoms that initially appear to be a simple flu. As the episodes unfold, we see them subjected to a barrage of tests, invasive procedures, and consultations that, while necessary for diagnosis, spiral into a financial nightmare. At the end of it all, when they're handed a bill that looks like a mortgage, the audience can almost feel the dread that washes over them. The relief of recovery is undercut by the harsh reality of financial ruin, a horror that lingers long after the credits roll. Let's talk about House and his team. Sure, they're fascinating characters with their own struggles, but have you ever considered how utterly isolated they are from the real consequences of their patients' experiences? House himself is a genius, but his sharp wit often feels like a shield against the horror unfolding around him. He's an anti-hero, and while we root for him to solve the medical mysteries, we often forget that behind every diagnosis is a person facing the terror of their mortality and their financial ruin. Consider Dr. Cameron, who often struggles with the emotional toll of their work. While she embodies compassion and empathy, she is also confronted with the stark reality of the system. Her character arc beautifully illustrates the internal conflict many doctors face: the desire to help patients clashing with the constraints of a broken system. In one episode, she might break down after losing a patient, reflecting the emotional weight that comes with being in such a harrowing environment. Yet, she is also caught in the nightmare of hospital politics and the financial realities that shape treatment decisions. Then there's Dr. Chase, who often navigates his own moral dilemmas while trying to balance his ambition with the humanity of the patients. His moments of doubt and struggle reflect the broader horror of working within a healthcare system that can seem more like a machine than a sanctuary. The doctors, despite their intellect and skills, are portrayed as mere cogs in a wheel that spins faster with each passing day, leaving them exhausted and disillusioned. In most episodes, the focus is on the medical puzzle rather than the human cost. The patients, with their tragic stories and devastating diagnoses, often feel like mere plot devices to showcase House's brilliance. But if we step back and really examine their journeys, it's chilling. They are more than just sick people. They are often portrayed as ghosts, slowly fading away while battling not only their illnesses but also the crushing weight of medical debt. Consider the young woman who comes in with a mysterious rash that ends up being a symptom of a rare autoimmune disorder. She spends the entire episode in limbo, not just fearing for her life, but also wondering how she will afford treatment. By the end of the episode, she might be cured, but the real horror remains. The looming threat of financial ruin hangs over her like a dark cloud. This encapsulates a grim reality that resonates deeply with viewers, reminding them that even in recovery, the financial implications can be devastating. The show also often highlights the impact of chronic illness on the lives of patients. We see characters whose lives are turned upside down, families torn apart, dreams shattered, all because of a medical condition they can't control. The emotional fallout is as horrifying as the physical symptoms, showcasing how illness can become an all-consuming monster that devours hope and happiness. Now, let's talk about the healthcare system itself. If you want a real-life monster, look no further than the bureaucracy and red tape that characterize hospitals. The constant struggle against insurance companies, the fight for coverage, and the endless paperwork all contribute to a sense of dread. Each episode's climax isn't just about saving a life. It's also about navigating a labyrinthine system that can feel more like a trap than a lifeline. Every time House and his team scramble to save a patient, they're also navigating this nightmarish landscape of medical ethics, insurance policies, and financial constraints. The doctor's battles against disease are overshadowed by the chilling realization that, for many patients, survival might mean financial disaster. It's a horror show masquerading as a medical drama. We often see characters who have to make impossible choices, weighing the cost of treatment against their financial realities. One episode features a patient whose treatment is denied by insurance because it's deemed experimental, leaving them to grapple with a life-threatening condition without any viable options. The horror isn't just in the illness. It's in the helplessness of facing a system that prioritizes profit over patient welfare. Ultimately, the real monsters in House aren't just the diseases the characters face. They're the very structures that govern healthcare. The show highlights the moral dilemmas that arise when patient care is influenced by profit margins. With every diagnosis and treatment, there's a financial cost looming in the background, a terrifying reality that often leaves patients feeling more trapped than relieved. Take the episode where a wealthy patient's condition allows them to bypass standard procedures and treatments. This stark contrast between those who can afford the best care and those who cannot sheds light on a horrifying truth. Healthcare is often a privilege, not a right. The disparity is palpable, and the show does an excellent job of showcasing the chilling reality that access to life-saving treatments can depend on a person's financial status. This theme of privilege versus poverty runs throughout the series. The show occasionally features characters from lower socioeconomic backgrounds who face additional barriers, such as lack of insurance or inability to pay out-of-pocket expenses. Their struggles add another layer of horror to the narrative, as we witness how the healthcare system can further entrench societal inequalities. Another often overlooked aspect of the horror in House is the lingering trauma experienced by patients and their families. The emotional toll of a serious illness doesn't just vanish after treatment. Many characters return to their everyday lives, but the scars, both physical and emotional, remain. We see patients struggling with PTSD, anxiety, and depression, which often go unaddressed in the whirlwind of medical drama. In one memorable episode, a patient who survives a near-fatal illness must grapple with the emotional fallout of their experience. The initial relief of survival is quickly overshadowed by the fear of recurrence and the mental health issues that arise from such trauma. This portrayal underscores the idea that the horror of illness doesn't end with a diagnosis. It continues to haunt survivors long after they leave the hospital. As viewers, we're drawn into the chaos of House, often rooting for the doctors and feeling a sense of triumph when they solve a case. But what if we were to shift our focus? What if we viewed ourselves as part of the system? The horror of House invites us to reflect on our own roles as consumers within the healthcare landscape. It challenges us to think critically about the ethics of a system that can often feel more like a profit-driven machine than a compassionate network of care. When the credits roll, we're left with a nagging sense of unease. The horror lingers, prompting us to question our own healthcare experiences, the cost we've incurred, and the way we view illness. It forces us to confront the uncomfortable truth that, for many, navigating the healthcare